it's just hard, and I thought the whole time, I can walk through any mall or store or whatever, and like not a single person would ever know I have cancer. And sometimes there are days when I hate that because I feel like crap and I just want people to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are days when I'm so thankful for that because like I don't have to talk about it every day. I don't have to explain it to people all the time if I don't want to, And then, I watched my friend Sarah lose her hair. She had beautiful, long, thick, beautiful, long blonde hair, and she lost her hair, and like she can't walk through Target without people knowing, or assuming anyway, what she's going through, and like that's hard. She can't hide from it. She can't get away from it.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jarrett Basson with Mark McCain, and you are listening to Triumph Every Day. We discuss the journeys that shape the lives of our guests and how it brought them to where they are today. And today we have special guest Tamara Scull. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Tamara just got done with a little barbell club, so some little deload week, which is always nice.
It is nice.
Yeah.
Finally.
Get done with things a little bit early, usually as well. Sometimes it drags on for what seems like ever, but 70% is always nice to hit. Tamara is been with our barbell club for how long now? Do you have any idea?
I started last year, I think in May.
In May, yeah.
After the spring weightlifting meet, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That was here, and I lifted here. And
was it Earth Movers? The first Earth Movers one? Yep.
It was. Yeah.
And we kind of made a little transition over and started coming here a little more regularly, but that's also not the first time that we met. You actually originally went to that Covington gym that we
100 years ago. I think Mark was my on-ramp trainer 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And back on a Groupon.
Yeah. So so we've known each other for some time now, and it's obviously been a little bit of a journey. Are you actually from the Cincinnati, North Kentucky area?
No, I'm not. I was born in Florida, moved to Kentucky when I was like 4 or 5, but spent my whole life in Western Kentucky in Owensboro, which is like 3 hours west, right along the river, but on the Indiana end of Kentucky, right on the river.
Gotcha. How'd you make your way towards the area?
So I ended up going to law school at Chase at Northern Kentucky University. So in a real roundabout way, I had a friend that I met when I lived in Owensboro who lived in Evansville, which is just, it's further than it is from like Covington to Cincinnati, but similar concept, right?
Okay.
Like right across the next city across the river from Owensboro. And we met at a barbecue, and we were dating people who were friends, and we became really good friends. And she's from Lawrenceburg. So at some point she moved back, I want to say in like 2008 or 2009, we kept in touch. And then whenever I decided to come to law school, I actually lived with her the first year, and she lives down in Covington, near Latonia Terrace. And so that's where I lived my first year of law school. And then I moved out, got my apartment, finished law school, and lived there for a while. And then I bought a house. And so this is where I am now.
Now you're here.
This is where I live now. Yeah.
Was it just like things fell in your lap and you kind of were like, well, I have a job here now, so I should buy a house? Or is it like, I enjoy being here, so I want to stay?
Well, I would say both.
Yeah.
When I started law school, I didn't really know like where I wanted to be or whatever. I mean, I was like fine with being here. So growing up in Owensboro, significantly smaller than the Cincinnati metro area, right? Because like Florence is small, but it's surrounded by so many other things that it doesn't seem small, and Covington doesn't seem small, and Cincinnati doesn't seem small to me, especially, I grew up in a really small area, and so...
I can speak to that. It seems really big to me, too.
Where are you from?
Very small town, northeast Ohio.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah, so it felt big and exciting and cool when I was here, and then like my first summer out of law school, I did an internship in the Bronx, New York. And then I was like, well, I want to live in New York. And so, I like tried, a lot of avenues to get into even bigger metropolitan areas. But it's really hard to do that fresh out of law school and everything. And so when I did get a job here, it seemed like the right thing. So.
Was law always like something you wanted to go into, or is it just kind of like, I'll try it?
I think law kind of fell into my lap a little bit. I actually went to undergrad thinking I was going to be a high school English teacher. But turns out I don't like teenagers at all. They're awful.
It takes a different breed of person to be able to.
Yeah, I made it all the way through
like
3.5 of my 4 years, and I was like starting, the student teaching portion, and I was like,
ooh, that's
hard pass.
Hits,
I mean, it was so terrible, and I said, I just can't do this. But the way they were structured it, it's in secondary education is you have like a major plus secondary education, right? So I had an English degree, which is super useful in the real world. And so I left college and I went and I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I liked it, but it was hard work and it's long hours and, and for me, I was commuting a really, really long way because at that point I was not ready to just make the leap and like move wherever my job was. At 21, that just wasn't what was in it for me. So anyway, I transitioned into a different sales job, which I hated. And then I just decided I want to do something that I felt like mattered more than selling printer copier functions. It does matter, right? It is so essential to people's businesses. But I just really couldn't get passionate about it. And so I said, what the hell? I think I'll go to law school.
That's awesome. And obviously it's been working out.
Yeah, I think
it's definitely probably altered the course of not just your life, but your psyche and the way you think about things and people and things like that.
Law school changes your brain forever. I'm convinced.
Well, and I think where
the
area that you've gone into is, you're a public defender, and that's different than being a high profile lawyer. That's so you're dealing with the common man, so to speak, a lot more. And some of the cases, and not cases, but the things that you've talked about, it seems like you have to care about the people who are coming into your life, even though they may have had some wrongdoing. You have to treat them as just like anybody else.
I want to treat them that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I tell people, the reason I became a public defender is probably a couple of reasons, but number one, it's just because of who I was as a person. I didn't grow up with all the privileges in the world and everything like that, but, my mom tried really hard, but I was really, really lucky that even though I grew up probably on the lower, like, middle class end of things, my mom was a single parent for most of my life, but she never was like a drinker. She never did drugs or anything like that. And for whatever reason, I never wanted to do those things either. Not more than the normal person, right? Like every teenager drinks or whatever. You do those things, but I never got into those things. And then when I finally went to law school, I met somebody, a professor and a mentor, who just talked about people, his clients, in a way that just made me think, gosh, that is the kind of person I want to be. I want to be the kind of person that can see something good in everybody, no matter what it is that, like, no matter why they're in front of me, right? Because I'm a criminal defense lawyer, so like I see people at their worst. I see people at their lowest points. Often they're detoxing from drugs or alcohol, and they're angry and they're frustrated and they're scared, and they've done something to get themselves in that situation, whether or not it's the thing they're charged with, right? But some decision they've made has led to them being incarcerated, and in this terrible state of mind, and I never want to be the person that's kicking somebody when they're down. I want to be that person that's like, look, I'm not here to make you feel worse about your circumstance.
What responsibility do you find? Like, do you find you have some sort of like, I need to just take care of you in the sense of the law, or do you find you give people guidance and things like that along the way?
I think that I tend towards it's not my place to tell you what to do with your life or the choices that you've made, or to reinforce the choices that you've made are poor. But I think the most important thing I do for people is not the legal advice, because unsurprisingly, people who have had a lot of contact with the criminal justice system often know things better than I did when I started as a lawyer, right? And you know, they know the penalties they're facing. They know what the Commonwealth would have to prove against them. They're smart. You know, people have this idea that people who commit crimes are stupid. They're not. They're intelligent people who have found themselves in terrible circumstances. But I think the most important thing that I do is treat people like a human being and like they have dignity and worth, and listen to them. You know, a lot of times I think people get really frustrated because when they have contact with the criminal justice system, they don't feel heard. They feel like they're just being shuffled through, you know, and everybody's just trying to get the docket done, and they're trying to get to the next docket, and they just want to know whether or not you're going to trial. They don't want to hear what anybody has to say. And I think some of the most important conversations I've had with clients are, well, just what do you think I need to know, you know, and people feel heard, and I think that's really important.
I think that's probably true in, it's not a business, but in any sense of the word, of having a relationship with people. People feel like they just need to be heard.
Yeah.
You know, and Mark coins it. I don't know where you got it from, but you know, we don't want a transactional business. You know, I think that's very true. You want these to have these moments with people to where you're entering in their life in more than just a sense of like, come to the gym. All right, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
You know. I think it sounds in a roundabout way kind of what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
It's not just like, hey, hi Jim, how you doing? Okay, you're going to trial on this day. Okay, see you later.
Right. Yeah.
In that sense too, just like we see in a very lighter sense, you know, not necessarily people's worst days. Sometimes whenever they're stepping their first foot into our gym, you know, I'd probably say it's probably the minority of clients. Like,
there's been one or two, but not many.
A couple people where they're like, hey, my doctor says I need to come here or else I'm going to die. And they're, you know, or whatever. And they're a little bit, you know, scared and hesitant and intimidated and all these things. And really all we need to do, it's not like, all right, well, here's our prices. It's, hey, man, like, I'm sorry to hear that. Or, you know, and that's, like,
hear what they're saying
exactly,
and not try to get their business. Yeah.
You're a human being, and you know, and in that sense, like you said, they're not stupid. They're smart. They know, like, hey, vegetables are good. I know that I need to stop smoking,
bad.
and drinking, but I'm addicted. You know, whatever it is. So yeah, there's obviously some crossover anytime you're dealing with just human beings.
Yeah, yeah. People are very complex, and I think we're all very good at seeing it in ourselves, you know, and saying like, well, it's complicated. You don't understand, right? But I don't think everyone's always as gracious to others as they are to themselves or to people that they care about, right? Sure. So if your best friend was struggling with a heroin addiction, you know, you would feel a lot differently about it than somebody you see who is overdosing on the sidewalk, right? And that's human nature. We're tribe oriented, but I think it's important to just try, you know, and like even if you find yourself in those terrible, I have thoughts about clients. Sometimes I get so frustrated. I hear the same things over and over and over again, but that doesn't mean they're not true, right? It just means that there's a larger population struggling with a particular issue that like I didn't know about. And so it's really hard, but I am in the business of grace.
Yeah,
for 100%. Sure.
Yeah, that self-awareness is so key, and just perspective on, you know, obviously we just, you know, we're sitting here a couple days after 9/11. And just having that, like, reality, you know, sink in every year around this time of, like, you know, when it happened, I was in high school, and you don't really understand the gravity of that situation in the moment. But, you know, I was, like, looking back at some of the clips, and now they've got recordings of loved ones calling, you know, home, and I'm just, like, sends chills up and down my body just thinking about it, because forever their lives are changed. And forever that city has changed, and forever... You know, so anyway, just like reforms of perspective sometimes like that, to where I'm like, man, you know, maybe my life's not perfect, but at least I've got a shot. And like for those people, for you, you're probably just like, I know this seems really bad, but you know, like we're gonna get you through it, and then you constantly getting that dose of perspective daily probably makes you almost appreciate the things you have.
And not to mention, you're taking in life experiences through someone else's eyes, and there's that will, kind of like Mark said, that will absolutely change you. You know, you can't walk around and pretend you didn't just experience, what that person's going through.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a different level of understanding. I think, like you said, you can give people grace a little bit more whenever you understand the full story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you see the guy on the sidewalk that's, maybe overdosing and you've never experienced that before, you're going to make a quick judgment on what that person's life has been like. You've no idea.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And I'm sure you've seen people come from all walks of life. Sometimes generally, if you have a little more money, you're not going to be using public defender, but at the same
But
time,
I see them,
yeah, exactly.
in
I
court.
mean, it's like, but at the same time, it's like drugs, alcohol addiction, even very serious crimes, murder and assault and things like that happens across the board. It doesn't really matter what age, race, wealth level you're actually at. So
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like a lot of people are not exposed to that, though. Is kind of what I'm getting at,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So just your
It's
exposure
easy
to that.
Yeah, it's easy to be insulated in your. We're tribe oriented, right? So we
Right.
hang around with people who are like us, right? And it's comfortable and it's comforting. And so I get pushed outside my comfort level all the time, and it's hard. I can recognize everyone has biases, right? And all of that. And everybody has them, and we have to learn to recognize them and move past it. In my line of work, I've just come to terms with so many things where I'm like, I'm uncomfortable, and recognize that why am I uncomfortable, and
Right.
how do I become more comfortable, and I think every single time it just comes down to seeing this person for who they are, right? Listening to them and understanding that they have inherent value, worth, and dignity.
Absolutely.
You
look at the, obviously reference to 9/11. Obviously, you look at, for a lot of people, probably myself in particular, I didn't realize the gravity of what terrorism was until that day, and then obviously you see the repercussions with how Muslims are treated in this country now, where it's it's heartbreaking in some regards, and obviously the ones that are radical terrorists, then it's justified. But I know we've had several Muslims come through the gym over the years, and they've been some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. But it's it's just natural to have that inclination, if you're on the plane now and whatever it is, and it's not right. But like you said, we all have biases, and we all like you said, it's recognizing it. All right, why am I afraid? Okay, well, it was because of this thing happened 15 years ago or whatever 17 years ago, and I need to look past that. It's fine, and operate accordingly.
Yeah. So one of the big reasons why we have you on today is September is a very close month to you, correct?
Yeah.
If you want to maybe go in a little bit into that and what September is.
So September is Blood Cancer Awareness Month. Congress made that so in 2010, so it's kind of a more recent thing. And so for the entire month of September, I have personally been sharing things on my Facebook about cancer facts and blood cancer facts, leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, just trying to kind of raise awareness for that and raise funds for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And because as somebody who deals with leukemia every day, it's really near and dear to my heart. And I have a lot of friends and loved ones who have also been affected by blood cancer. And I think that it's hard I don't think you could talk to a single person that who doesn't know someone who has been affected by a cancer, right?
Yeah.
And so every cancer probably has their heyday or their month, but I'm hoping that this month people will take a little bit of time and learn a little bit about blood cancers and how prevalent they are and how many people are living with a blood cancer or going to be diagnosed with a blood cancer. The LLS and the American Cancer Society estimate that every 3 minutes a person is diagnosed with a blood cancer. So we've been sitting here for
20
almost
minutes.
21 minutes. So 7 people in the time that we've been sitting here have been diagnosed with blood cancer, which is kind of a sobering fact, And I didn't know anything about leukemia until I got diagnosed with it. And in that time, I've had a lot of forced education and there's still a ton that I don't know, so I try to educate myself, and I hope that people will take a little time this month and educate themselves.
So what, and go in depth as much as you like, but, maybe just a little bit about your story, your journey through, being perfectly fine, healthy to, kind of where you are today.
I'm really bad about talking about this without getting hysterical, so I'm gonna try.
No, you're fine. Like I said, share as much or as little as you like. This is totally.
So I started CrossFit like in my last year of law school, and that was a really good idea for me because it was a very good stress reliever. And then as I studied for the bar exam,
law school stressful.
A little bit.
No way.
Every now and again. But as I studied for the bar exam, and even when I went and took the bar exam, I was in Columbus, so I went to CrossFit Grandview every day that I was there and worked out. And I think that was a really healthy choice for me. So I started making a lot more healthy choices. I don't think that I really grew up being super health conscious. Just the culture of where I grew up and the family that I grew up in, it just really wasn't. We eat a lot of vegetables, but maybe we fry them every now and again. So, I think I got to a point where I was feeling pretty fit and pretty focused. And honestly, it just came down to, I had a lot of symptoms. Like if you look up symptoms of leukemia, they're really vague symptoms. And the symptoms are vague until they become really super serious, right? So there's a point at which you get really, really sick, and like once you're at that point, you're on a downward slope, and it's hard to come back from that. So lucky for me, I was not at that point, but I had unexplained weight loss when I was diagnosed. I was almost 20 pounds lighter than I am right now, and at 4 foot 9 inches tall, like that's a lot of weight. I was really thin. I thought I looked great, and I thought it was because I was exercising and eating right, but it really was because my white blood cell count was through the roof. But I was really, really, really tired, also because my white blood cells were through the roof. I was falling asleep on my lunch hour. I would come home. I live in Covington. I work in Newport, so I often will come home for lunch. And especially if I'm done with court for the day, I put this on because I don't want to wear a suit all day. And so I was falling asleep and like not eating lunch and just falling asleep and getting a phone call like, where are you? And I had fallen asleep and didn't realize it. And things like that. So there was all these symptoms that I did have that I didn't recognize as symptoms of being ill. And so I actually just went in, and people start asking you after you turn 30, they start asking you things about like your cholesterol and things like that, and you're like, I don't know, right? So anyway, I had routine blood work done, and I had it done on a Wednesday, and on a Thursday they called me and said like, you need to see an oncologist, hematologist today. And I was like pretty freaked out about it, and she just, she said, she started rattling off numbers from my blood work, and I had to make her slow down. I said, I don't know what any of those words mean. I don't know what the numbers mean. And ultimately what she told me was that your white blood cells, high white blood cell count is like number one indicator in your blood work of leukemia. And so have you guys had blood work done recently?
Not recently.
I'm actually scheduled to get it
So when you get it done, you should look at it, right? Like, and you can go in if you're St. Elizabeth, it's my chart or whatever.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because they'll show you like all of the different things that they're testing in your blood, and they show you what your range was and what the normal range is. And sometimes if it's like even if it's just like 1 point outside of the range, it'll be highlighted. Well, for me, so a normal range for your white blood cell count, for instance, is usually somewhere between like 3 and 11, right? And that's like thousands per million or whatever, right? Like that's a part. But it's 3 to 11, and mine were 294,000.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It's incredibly high. And because of that, obviously they were crowding out all of the red blood cells. So my red blood cells were incredibly low. And if you go back to biology and you remember like what your white cells and your red cells do, your red cells carry oxygen to your blood, your white cells fight infection. So like I was invincible, 100%.
Oh yeah.
But I was also at risk for blood clots. My platelet count. So your platelet count, if you look at it, you'll probably see it's somewhere between 140 to 450 thousands, right? Mine were over 1 million. It was 1.2 million platelets. Which means I was at very high risk for blood clots.
If you cut yourself, you'd scab instantly.
Yeah, right, or I would die from a blood clot.
Yeah.
And so she's explaining these things, and I was just, I'm like Googling like high white blood cell count, and everything says leukemia. And I was like, do I have cancer? Like, am I going to die? Like, and, she's like, I don't know. It could just be a lab mistake, but like it's not a mistake or a risk we're willing to take. She said, call these numbers. She said, if they can't get you in today, you call me back and we'll get you into Christ Hospital. I know they'll take you. And it just was probably the scariest conversation I've ever had in my whole life. I can't think of another time when I have had a medical professional tell me like, this cannot wait. If you can't do it tomorrow, you can't do it next. I mean, how many times have you called your doctor and they're like, we got appointments in 3 months,
Right.
So it was just really, it was the scariest conversation, and I went to see an oncologist, hematologist. They specialize in blood cancers, ultimately they initially put me on like blood thinners and things like that. And there's they have to send off a genetic test. They do a bone marrow biopsy and they test your blood and they send it off for like a very specific genetic marker, which I have, and the rest is history.
So the bone marrow test, that doesn't sound fun.
It's not.
Yeah,
No.
I've heard that one's painful.
But
you get all those tests done, and then
you get all the tests done, and then there are first line approved treatments and there are second line approved treatments. So lucky for me, like even with my white blood cell count as high as it was, they still determined that I was in chronic phase. So when you hear about other cancers like breast cancer, there's like stage 1, 2, 3, 4,
Sure.
5, right? So for chronic myeloid leukemia, because it's a slow-growing cancer, they have 3 phases. And so they have chronic, they have accelerated, and they have blast phase. And if you're in accelerated, they usually try and do like a burst of treatments that try to get you down, right? And they're just basing this on the number of cancerous cells in your blood, right? This is like microbiology,
Right.
And if I had been in blast phase, like I would die. Like once you're there, there's almost no coming back from it.
That's a very intense word to use for.
Yeah, and
like
they call
the
it blast
worst.
crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you
Like and again, I'm sure there's a
chronic
reason.
sounds better.
It does. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
It just sounds like on such a very emotional and personal subject. Like blast crisis is maybe
Yeah.
not the. You could call it purple phase and
Yeah.
the doctors would know what it means.
Yeah.
it's like, all right, we're about to take you into blast crisis. Let's get your heart rate up.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky, ultimately, and I think, I have joined a lot of support groups and things like that, and I've heard from a lot of other people. Now, to be clear, the median age is like 65 to 74, right? So like being diagnosed this young is not the norm, and it's a rare form of blood cancer anyway. So like you're talking like 0.5% of all cancer diagnoses is chronic myeloid leukemia, and like 1/2 of that 1/2 is people my age.
Wow.
So there's not that many people my age who deal with it. So oncologists don't see a lot of people my age, and my oncologist was very clear that the fact that I was so healthy going in, like they don't know when this started growing because it's a slow growing cancer. I might have had it for years, and they, probably 2 years based on the size of my spleen. So they measure the size of your spleen whenever mine was like the size of a Nerf football, which is apparently pretty big. It's not supposed to be that big.
Jack spleen.
But it made it really hard to breathe. Right, it was like pressing against my lung. It made it hard to breathe. I got really short of breath, and things like that. So I mean, there was a lot of emotional things, and it's really hard to unpack that and figure out like how to tell people what do you tell. Nobody understands what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, because you're when you think of cancer, you have the kind of person in your head already.
It's finite, right?
You like, okay, well, this is usually what this person looks like, especially if you're going through chemo and things like that. Like, you have this idea, and you see someone like yourself, you're like, what are you talking about? Like you said, like, I look great.
Yeah.
So how do you, it's like, how do you go through that and explain to people what's wrong? And they're like, what do you mean you're short of breath? And what do you mean you're tired all the time? It's like,
it's
that's like the running joke though with like WebMD, right? It's like, I got a hangnail. Oh, I got cancer.
Yeah.
If you Google the symptoms.
Oh yeah.
But it's so hard to pick up on that.
Yeah.
You said chronic, right? So chronic meaning this is something you have.
Chronic meaning it's slow growing, and that because of organizations like the LLS, right, which I'm hoping people will get on their Google and look it up and read some stuff. But they have been working diligently since like the 60s. They have quadrupled survival rates for blood cancers, right? So when they, and I'm using the elusive they, right? When researchers figured out what caused chronic myeloid leukemia, right? They figured out that it was a translocation of your chromosomes. So you have 11 sets of chromosomes, right? And they look like this. And when someone has chronic myeloid leukemia, for whatever reason, they don't know why, and they don't know when, and they don't know how to stop it from happening, but at some point, chromosome 9 and chromosome 22 translocate. And they're not supposed to pair. Like 9 is supposed to pair with 9 and 22 is supposed to pair with 22. But for whatever reason, they twist up your chromosomes. And so that triggers the overproduction of a protein, a specific protein in your white blood cells that causes your white blood cells to like mass produce in a ridiculous way. And that is CML. And when they discovered that, they didn't know what to do about it, right? So for 40 years, 50 years, they people just died. I mean, and like it didn't happen in 6 months, but in 3 years you were gonna die, and there was nothing they could do about it except make you comfortable. And eventually, like your white blood cells, we're gonna crowd out all the healthy red blood cells. And I don't know why I'm getting emotional about that. This is not happening to me, but eventually you were gonna die. Your blood was essentially gonna turn to sludge.
It's bad news. And
you were gonna die. And so because of organizations like the LLS, they were able to fund a lot of research. And so this brilliant researcher named Dr. Drucker figured out how to target the production of that specific protein, which is fabulous, right?
Yeah. People are so smart.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable. So they can target the overproduction of a specific protein called tyrosine kinase. And so he developed a tyrosine kinase inhibitor, like a drug that specifically targets the overproduction of that protein. And they did all these clinical trials, and lo and behold, people were not dying anymore. And so that drug was first approved in 2001. So
good news for you.
So
yeah, I mean, it's crazy,
and
right?
I want to just basically compliment you. We're talking about you having something that's going to affect you for the rest of your life, and one of the things you said was, "I'm lucky."
Yeah, I mean,
and to have that perspective, I think.
Well, it took time. I didn't feel that way 2
Oh,
years ago.
100%. No, but I'm saying, as time goes on, and like you said, you do more research and things like that. It's like, what are the chances that that drug was made at that time, and that you have this chronic form and not blast crisis phase?
Yeah,
Thank God.
What are the odds, right? Like we were talking about 2001, right? The same 17 years ago, this drug was approved by the FDA, and it's just like, I will never know, like, what was that cosmic nod or push that like made me go get my blood work done at that time. You know what I mean? Like I'll never know why that happened. I think people who are religious have a theory on that. I think people who aren't have a different theory or whatever. But I do feel incredibly lucky because my doctor asked, like, have you had unexplained weight loss? I'm like, no, it's super explainable. I work really hard at it.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, are you fatigued? I'm like, yes, I'm a lawyer and I CrossFit and I'm busy. You know, do you have night sweats? And I said, well, do you mean I wake up like hot? Yeah, I live in a 105-year-old house and the air conditioning's not great upstairs. Like there was an answer to everything. Right. He was like, do you have this symptom? No. 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 Right? And the truth is like, after the fact, yeah, I totally had all of those symptoms, right? As explained by the fact that I rapidly gained back 20 pounds. You know, and it's hard sometimes. You know, I think the hardest thing for me to try and talk to people about it is that they're like, okay, well, like, how is treatment going? When will you be in remission? Like, when will you be done? And that's the hard part, because they don't know how to fix it. All they know how to do is tamp it down. Right, so the drugs that I take, they tamp it down, and as soon as I stop taking them, it ramps back up, and they overproduce at a faster rate. So I got sick last year in February, and I couldn't get well, and they finally said, you know, you have to stop taking your meds because they're immunosuppressive, and like you're just not going to get better with taking them. And so I stopped taking them under the direction of my oncologist for 2 weeks, and my numbers were almost as high as they were at diagnosis. And like, that shouldn't happen, right? But your body, we all know with weight loss, right? Your body fights against change like real hard. And so, you know, I will probably have to take these drugs for the rest of my life. And they're not fun drugs to take, so I don't feel lucky in that regard. But I feel lucky that I get to have a long life, you know.
And not to mention, I mean, we were just talking this morning during Barbell Club about, you know, right now it's like, I'm tired because I'm throwing up every other night. Yeah. You know, and it's just something that you have to bear and live with at this point, you know. Yeah. But obviously the alternative is way worse.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's not a viable choice, you know. I think people often are like, you know, especially for people who have to take traditional treatments and things like that, which are more intense, right? They're shorter lived, right? Most people are lucky that they don't have to do it for years, right? They undergo chemo or radiation or whatever, and hopefully, you know, and thankfully it's usually a pretty short blip in the span of a lifetime, right? But I don't get that finite thing, right? It feels like a life sentence in some ways, you know, and it's always changing, right? Like, I wasn't throwing up every other night for the past, you know, year and a half, and all of a sudden they've added other drugs because, you know, this pill that I take causes this side effect, which is fixed by this other pill that I take, which causes this side effect, and I have to take this other pill to fix, you know what I mean? And you end up playing, you know, telephone with your medications, and eventually they don't play well together, which is what's happening right now. And you just put a bucket in your room and you throw up into it, and your loving fiance takes it down and gets rid of it so you can go back to sleep. Yeah. And that's just, you know, you just deal with it.
What kind of role does fitness play in your life currently, you know, and maybe as far as your treatment goes as well?
Well, as far as my health goes, it's very important to continue to do weight-bearing exercises and cardio, high-intensity, you know, interval training or whatever, just in terms of trying to maintain my health and my vigor. Oddly enough, the prescription for chemo-induced fatigue is exercise. But I mean, they've done all kinds of studies that it actually, counterintuitive though it might seem, it actually is productive for people struggling with fatigue to exercise, but also to learn to listen to your body. But for me, it's like mostly I think a mental thing, you know, just to come and have something else to think about, and listen to other people talk about what they have going on. And, you know, I think for everybody, CrossFit and barbell and stuff is a social thing. I mean, it's definitely a fitness tool, but it's always been for me like a social and mental stimulus, you know. My job is really hard.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, one of the things we talk about a lot here is, you know, we're trying to provide a sanctuary for people's day, you should be able to go whatever that is for you, is what we do for our people, but you should be able to have a place you can go that is yours.
Yeah.
That you can shut off,
I definitely have been the person who comes through the door like in a black cloud. I've definitely been that person on many days who comes in, and having a bad day, but I rarely leave that person. You know what I mean? I usually am able to leave that person, under the barbell or in a pool of sweat on the floor or whatever. And it's a thing to be grateful for, that there are people like you guys, or people like other trainers at other gyms or whatever, who are willing to take people at their worst and say, you know what? Get your heart rate up. You're going to feel better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
And it's true, right? You get that, all the aggression or whatever, and, they just crank the music up and you just go at it. And then you do feel better, right? You get those endorphins, you release that adrenaline, and you do feel better. And I think it's awesome to have a place to do that,
I think anyone that starts a gym finds fitness essential to life, and that's why we kind of believe in it. It's like, by doing this, I've improved, not only just my physical condition, but my mental and emotional, spiritual, whatever, all the states. And that's...
I think if you're doing it right, fitness is the byproduct of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I just listened to the radio on the way home yesterday, and they opened the first, believe it or not, the first Starbucks in Italy. The whole concept of Starbucks came from a trip to Italy. If you guys knew that or not, like he went to Italy and had his first cappuccino, and that's where Starbucks started
I didn't know
from.
that.
So they opened their first one in Milan. It's a 2,500 square foot space with marble and all this stuff. But the point is they're talking to, and of course the guy works for Starbucks, but he's talking about, he's like, we don't sell coffee, we sell convenience, we sell a warm place, we sell, they're selling this experience, and the coffee is the byproduct. It's what we're trying to do is, like, the fitness is the byproduct. What we're trying to quote sell is, the experience of being here and being with other people and being with people who are like you, people who are not like you, to kind of get this different worldview than you would get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I think that the more you can do that, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because I think we've definitely discovered by now, like, isolation doesn't work.
Yeah.
Whenever you're constantly isolating yourself and, people suck and all these things, it's like you need to get that social interaction between fellow humans.
Yeah. And I think you find the best people, right? Who, you got a bunch of people who, like, look good, feel good, sweating out their problems and, releasing all these endorphins, right? Like, you're in good company, know. I feel like that's been helpful for me, for sure.
Absolutely. So one of the things you said a little bit earlier is, you kind of go through, you help people with support groups and things like that. What maybe outside of obviously CrossFit and weightlifting and things like that, those help. What other things do you use for support for yourself?
Well, I also sing in a choir.
Very well, mind you.
I sing in the Young Professionals Choral Collective, which is a mouthful, but I found that group oddly in the spring of 2016, and it's so interesting. It's just a group of people, 21 to 45. There's no audition, and you just walk in. You pay like $30 for your music. They give you your music, and you sit down, and you're just surrounded by all these really cool people, right? Similar to CrossFit, but they're these artsy, intelligent people, and you're in this room of 160 people generally or so, and there's doctors and lawyers and veterinarians and engineers and teachers and marketing professionals and just people who do all of these different things, and they just come together to make music. And I think for me, I always grew up loving music, loving to sing, was always able to like carry a tune. Even when I was itty bitty, like it just was a God-given talent that I had. And when I, it's for me, it's kind of like the trifecta, right? Like work is like your mind, and CrossFit is like your body. And like for me, music is kind of like my spirit, and it's opened up so many opportunities for me to like make friends and meet cool people. And I feel like I have probably one of the most diverse groups of friends, because I have like my fitness friends, and then I have like work friends and law school friends, and then I have like my choir friends, you know, and getting to do all kinds of things with them. I think that has been really supportive for me. And you know, they had an opportunity a year or so ago to make a charitable donation, and they asked for suggestions, and I was really honored. They made a donation to the LLS in my name, and I got a little card in the mail, and I just thought that was just so special and so meaningful, because like I don't personally like need that much, right? Like I need people to give me grace whenever I'm like in a chemo fog and I can't remember like why I went from one room to another, and I need somebody to tell me it's okay to skip a workout when I vomited up everything I ate last night, you know, and like I need that. But like I'm okay, you know, day to day I'm okay, but
there are other people who are not. There's other people who are not.
There are people who are not, and you know, I had this really weird experience where like I had this chronic cancer that nobody understands, and I try really hard to educate people about it, and that's why I spend September being obnoxious on Facebook saying like, please look at this, like here are these facts, hear this, you know. And then I had this weird experience where like this other person at my gym who was also really fit and young and healthy like got diagnosed with breast cancer, and I think I cried harder for her than I did for me, you know, because it seems unfair. It seems like, you know, people who take care of themselves should be okay, you know, and it doesn't seem fair. And so I think for me to take care of myself is mostly, you know, to try and interact in these communities where people are there for me, but I can be there for them too. See, I told you I can't talk about it without
no,
getting
you're fine.
emotional.
It's an emotional subject. I mean, like you said, you would be hard pressed to find one person that has not been affected in some way, shape, or form by, you know, especially people who are our age. If you're 9 or 10, you know, but I mean, especially our age where, you know, I remember going through high school and, you know, a kid died of leukemia, you know, and it's like we've had aunts and uncles and friends and family and you know, people that have gone through it while we've been at this location, you know, so it's a terrifying, you know, like you said, you feel like you're doing everything right, you know.
It seems so unfair.
And it does. It really, really does. And it sometimes just seems like a flip of a coin, you know. So, but I totally understand at least where you're coming from with that. Just being emotionally impacted by other people.
It's just hard, you know. And I thought the whole time, you know, I can walk through any mall or store or whatever, and like not a single person would ever know I have cancer. And sometimes there are days when I hate that because I feel like crap and I just want people to understand. And then there are days when I'm so thankful for that because like I don't have to talk about it every day. You don't have to explain it to people all the time if I don't want to, you know. And then, you know, I watched my friend Sarah lose her hair. She had beautiful, long, thick, beautiful, long blonde hair, and she lost her hair, you know, and like she can't walk through Target without people knowing, you know, or assuming anyway, you know, what she's going through, you know, and like that's hard. She can't hide from it. She can't get away from it, you know. Like I didn't believe people, but they, you know, when I was first diagnosed, like people in these support groups were like, you know, you'll get to a point where like there are days you don't even think about the fact that you have cancer, you know, and like, by golly, there are days that I don't think about it, you know, awesome. Like when I'm busy, having fun and feeling good, that I don't think about it at all, you know, and I don't know that that's true for people who have to undergo traditional treatments who lose their hair, you know, where it's just like a constant reminder. And so I'm thankful for that sometimes, you know, and then other times it's frustrating, but.
Yeah, I can see both sides for sure. So, you know, we've maybe just talk a little bit about what's maybe next for you on the horizon. I mean, I know you
lifting all the things.
Yeah, we've been going through some technique changes and things like that. So I know we had a mentally a rough meet recently. So, but that's
epic failure.
But that is a good thing. I know it's the same kind of thing you're talking about before. It doesn't seem like at the time, but I promise you, it's a good thing.
It was an epic failure. It was something I really looked forward to. But I enjoy doing weightlifting meets. I don't think I'll ever win one, unless I'm the only person there. But I really enjoy the challenge of it. It's so different from a CrossFit competition.
I love the solidarity.
Yeah.
I love you can kind of go into yourself, in the really good days, you feel like you've conquered the world.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to explain when you only understand the CrossFit side of it. Because
like
everyone snatches and clean and jerks.
Yeah, well, and everyone, at a CrossFit competition, right, like, there's the friendly competition where everybody's like, yeah, and there's the person, they're going to make their max attempt, and they missed it, and they're going to try again, and they have, like, 13 seconds, and they're going to try it again, and everyone's, like, screaming, and they're like, you can do it,
and adrenaline
right?
kicks in.
And you just hear all of this stuff, right? And a weightlifting meet is, like, so different, right?
Just
because
silent.
You miss your first attempt, right? And you put more weight on the bar because you know you can hit it. And you go out and people are like, come on, Tamara, you can do it. Yeah. Right? Everybody's like, like they're like holding their breath, but it's the same feeling, right? Like it's that same, like we really want you to lift that bar, right? We want it to be a good lift, and I really like that. I like the focus of it,
I've talked to Jeff about it. It's a little bit of Zen. Because you, again, it's just you in a bar and
then like the whole world disappears, and you just are like, this is it. This is the only thing I have to focus on is getting this bar from the floor overhead without dropping it.
And I think it's very black and white for the audience too. Even like people that, hey, just come watch me do this thing. Like, what are you doing? Like, you'll find out.
Yeah.
Every now and then there's a little elbow bend that you're like, why is that no good? But like you said, did it go overhead or did it not?
Yeah. It's so for me, I want to continue to do weightlifting meets because it's uncomfortable and I like pushing myself there. I certainly have to redeem myself from the meet that I just did. That was terrible. Bad personal experience. I just had a really terribly off day. So I want to come back from that. But, I back at CrossFit. I took a little hiatus from CrossFit. Found out that I want to do CrossFit. I like doing CrossFit.
It's different.
Yeah, it's a completely different muscle stimulation. It's a completely different mental stimulation.
You talk about a yin and a yang.
Yeah.
It's like,
and there's certain days you got to back off, like in a personal note. There's days where I'm like, I'm not doing that workout because I know I'm at 85-90% this other day. But there's other days where it's just like, I just need to sweat.
I just need to get my heart rate up and sweat and everything like that. So, for me personally, those are kind of like my fitness goals. And then, I've got a goal to raise money for the LLS. I'm a little more than halfway there. But I'm walking in the Light the Night walk in October. I'm actually doing it in Lexington because I'm going to be out of town for the night that they have it in Cincinnati. But
how do people find that information?
Information, well, if you're friends with me on Facebook, I can send you the link if you want to post it, like with the podcast. It's on the LLS website. It's the main thing on the LLS website right now is the Light the Night walk. And I have a personal fundraising page that what we do is we raise money and it all goes towards the LLS, obviously. And then the walk itself is really cool. They have it in cities all across the United States on different nights. And it's just like a celebration event. And it's always really emotional for me, and I cry every year because you see people who had it worse than you. You know what I mean? People who are much, much sicker than I will probably, thankfully, ever be. And, they give out lanterns for patients and survivors that are white. And they give out red ones for people who are there to support people. And they give out gold ones to people who are walking in memory. And it's pretty incredible to see, boy, I'm super bad at
You're
this.
Fine. I can just imagine the sea of those colors just mixing.
It's beautiful, and it's uplifting, and it's heartbreaking, and it's just really special. But they take all that money, and they use it to have patient advocates and patient support specialists, so that if I need something or they change one of my medications and I can't afford it, I can call someone at the LLS chapter and they can put me in touch with patient support, and they make these patient support groups and these social events and things like that. So, I mean, it's a really valuable resource, not only for the research for life-saving medications, which, by the way, are really important.
Sure.
You know, I think in the past 10 years, like 40 therapies that are like approved for larger cancer treatments were originally researched for blood cancers. You know what I mean? So, like, even if you're saying, well, my family has a history of breast cancer or colon cancer or whatever, you know, one of those treatments might have come out of a blood cancer researcher's lab. So I think it's really important. So I'm doing that. And yeah, just, trying to get through day by day, trying to live my best life. I'm planning a wedding,
Yeah, I know that. Yep, that's a whole other part of it.
Planning a trip to New York City. I'm going to sing at Carnegie Hall with the Young Professionals Choral Collective.
Pretty amazing.
That's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
I auditioned to be in an opera. I got a call back, so I'm going to do I do all the things,
That's amazing. No, it's absolutely fantastic to hear.
Trying to live my best life.
As everyone should,
One day at a time, right?
Yeah.
If take anything away from someone who's, faced with something pretty grave and huge and gravity and things like that, that most people come out the other side and I need to go do stuff.
Yeah.
Experience life, right?
Yeah, you got to do all the things. There's a 1 in 5 chance that I won't survive SIBO, right? Like, 5-year relative survival rate is 80%, which is not awesome, but it's better than it used to be. And there's, tons of evidence to support the fact that, there's these 5 treatments, right? And I'm on number 3 because 1 didn't work and 1 had terribly adverse side effects for my heart. And, there's 2 other treatments that would be available to me if this one fails. And they determine things by failure is like if you don't reach what they call major molecular remission, right? You don't get enough cells tamped down, then they call you, say you're not in molecular remission, and we have to change or alter your treatment in some way, but there's tons and tons of people who end up with mutations where their bodies say, you know what, I don't like this medication.
Wow.
Well, let me change my genetics a little more so that the treatment doesn't work anymore. And so I'm really hopeful that never happens, but it's something I think about all the time.
You can't take time to dwell on it every day.
You can't dwell on it at all because it'll drive you crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just I want to. I don't. We all know that tomorrow's not promised. You know what I mean? Like, for those people that got on those planes in 2001, like, they had no idea that was the last day of their life. And so, like, we never know. I mean, I could get hit by a bus on the way to work, right?
Sure.
Like, who knows? But I think just I gained a perspective that a lot of people my age don't have, and not because my doctor said you're gonna die, right? But because my doctor said you are dying, and we think that we can slow it down, but your life is different forever, and they always talk about this new normal, and I think that's kind of BS, right? There's no new normal, right? Everything's changing for me all the time. But it does make me more of a yes person, I think, than I ever was before. Like I said, when I was 21 and I had a job and they were like, well, it's an hour away, so, like, you can commute an hour away or you can just move. And I was like, I think I'll drive. You know what I mean? And so, like, now I'm like, well, whatever.
That's what I want to do. Let's move.
That's what I'm just going to do it. And I think that, I've been able to surround myself with communities of people who are supportive of that. Which is
amazing.
cool.
I think people can learn a lot from that. Just appreciating each day, and even if you're not diagnosed with cancer, like, put your phone down and experience life with other people.
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age, I think that's a big time problem.
I'm a big fan of, like, I saw a thing where, when you have a dinner party or you have a party at your house, you just have a basket at the door, and everybody puts their phone in the basket.
I love that.
And, like, you can check if you got kids or what, you can check it every hour.
Right.
But like,
very rarely is thank God, very rarely is something that extreme going on that you have to answer at that exact moment.
Yeah,
I agree. So one thing we always, and I'm very, very interested to hear your response, but it's just a simple question, and that is, what is your definition of success?
definition of success, I think, would be giving whatever your task is. I think giving it your best shot and knowing that you left it all on the table, and regardless of whether or not it's an objective success, knowing that you gave it your all and learning something from it, right? So as a public defender, this is especially relevant because we don't traditionally win a lot, right? We get really bad cases, and you know, our clients are often found guilty or sent to prison or whatever, you know, but the win is not really, the success is not in the outcome, it's in the process. And so for me, I think I'm more of a process-oriented person than an outcome-oriented person. Again, in part because of my job and because of my personality, because of this diagnosis, right? Like, there's no win. Like, I don't get the last treatment day celebration. I don't get that. So, like, you just have to let that go and say, well, like, what's success today? Success is a day I don't throw up everything in the middle of the night. Success is a day that, you know, I can get to my workout and feel good and get a good night's sleep and not feel achy and not have to ice my joints at the end of the day. Like, that's a success. And so you just have to constantly redefine what success is, and it just can't be outcome oriented, right? It has to, you know, this is journey, not the destination kind of an idea, right? It just has to be the process is the success.
Sure.
Yeah, I like it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing your
Thanks.
story.
Thanks for
Great.
having me.
We'll post a link to the walk on the page and everything so that people can find you there, and we'll do our best to kind of spread the word. So,
Be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to Everyday or Triumph Every. Wow. Thank you all for listening to Triumph Every Day. That's the name of the new podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and everywhere your favorite podcasts are found. You can find us on TriumphStrength.net, on Instagram at TriumphStrength, and Facebook at Facebook.com/TriumphStrength. See you guys next week. Thank you.